All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome to Scoop Center. I'm Daniel, and I'm here with Jeremy. What's up, Jeremy?
What's going on, Daniel?
Not much, man. Just staying busy. Middle of a semester, we all know that feeling.
We do
So
all
yeah.
too familiar.
Mm-hmm. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to get together with you and talk some sports.
Yeah, man. It's always a good time whenever you and I have this opportunity to kind of just talk about sports, whether it's, here on that, like on air, or if we're just talking outside, it's usually our conversations go for a pretty long time. So, I mean, we'll see how long this one goes.
We'll have like a five what's supposed to be a 5 or 10 minute story, and we're there till like midnight or one.
Yeah. We just we just add on and it just goes on. And I mean, it's cool, man. I really enjoy it. I really do.
Me too, definitely. So we're gonna talk about a few things, but the first thing we're gonna talk about is some wrestling. Something that you and I have been able to enjoy talking about and kind of bond over our past wrestling experiences and
Yeah.
nostalgia and our love for that sport. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you just about wrestling, about your personal, preferences and stories about wrestling, and I know you were very big on it back in the day, maybe a little more so than you are now.
Yeah, I definitely, it's kind of crazy. So the whole my whole, I guess, introduction to wrestling and WWE was, I believe I must have been in 5th grade. I was about 10 years old, probably around 2005-ish. I was at a friend's house celebrating his birthday. It was my best friend in middle school. And so he invited me over to his house. It was all of us, it was about 5 or 6 of us, and they were all excited. It was a Friday night. They were like, "Hey, let's go to the TV, let's go watch wrestling." And I was there confused. I was like, "Wrestling? What do you mean wrestling?" And sure enough, we pop in front of the TV, Friday Night SmackDown starts playing, and they all know all the wrestlers' names. They know the storyline. They're so into it. And I was lost. I was like, "What's going on? Who's that? Who's this? Oh my God, this is awesome." And I just got hooked right away. And ever since then, I mean, I've just had an appreciation for WWE and wrestling.
Same thing for me. Maybe a little earlier, maybe a couple years before in elementary school, but like me and my group of friends, we would pretend at recess and lunch that we were Evolution, and we would like give each other different, like one of us was Batista, one of us was Ric Flair, one of us was Orton, and we would like walk around and pretend this. I mean, it was such a big part of my childhood. It was it was my obsession before basketball was my obsession. But as I got older, I was able to kind of appreciate them both in an equal way. So yeah, I mean, I love wrestling, and I have forever. Well, I mean, there's like anything, any love. There's times where you stop watching it for a bit, or you get tired of it, or you move on to something else. But I mean, that like you said, that appreciation for wrestling, it's always there.
Of course, yeah, completely agree with all that.
So, who was or is your favorite wrestler? Do you have one?
Ooh, if I had to pick one, that's a little hard. I think if I had to pick one that I was just hooked onto and I will always forever remember, it has to be Undertaker. I mean, the Friday Night SmackDown I saw at my friend's house that I just mentioned to you earlier, he was the main event. I don't remember who he was fighting, and honestly, I don't think that matters because I remember Undertaker for his entrance, for his presence, in and out of the ring. I mean, he was, everyone looked up to him, and the more I watched wrestling, the more I understood, why he was considered to be one of the greatest in that era, and I will
Yeah.
always, I bought shirts from him. There was one year for Halloween I dressed up as him. I mean,
Really?
yeah, if I wish I had pictures, otherwise I would show you. But
But
yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah, man, Undertaker, yeah, he'll always be my favorite. And if I had to pick another wrestler that I really was always kind of just like I would gravitate towards, would have to be Rey Mysterio. And the reason for him actually is because I don't think I've mentioned this to you before, but I have an uncle who was a luchador in Mexico. And so he was, it wasn't anything crazy, like no big crowds like we have here in the US, but main events over there would draw maybe 2,000 people, 3,000 people. And he would have a mask on just like Rey Mysterio did, and um, my dad would always tell me stories of when he would go to, when he would go visit them and they'd go watch him fight, and it was always fun. So, when I saw Rey Mysterio, I saw him wearing the mask, and I right away I was like, hey, like, I told my dad, is that sort of what my uncle would kind of do? And he was like, yeah, he was like, he had a mask like that, and I always remembered that, and ever since then, I loved Rey Mysterio because he was entertaining to watch. He was high flying. It was always never boring with him. I love that he was Mexican just like I am. I mean, there was just way too many ties. I was just like, I have to support this guy. And he's pretty local. I mean, San Diego's not that far, so
Yeah. I mean, Batista said one time in an interview or a documentary, something backstage, he was doing a match with Mysterio and he was getting the booze. I think him and Ray were teaming together, something like that. But there was, or it might have been a Royal Rumble. It was something where him and Ray were in the ring together and they were getting booze, and he was looking around and he said he thought to himself like, who's like, why? Who boos Rey Mysterio? Like, no one dislikes Rey Mysterio. That's the truth. Like,
it is.
he's always been babyface. He's always been the good guy. I mean, he's the ultimate underdog story in wrestling. So it's like there's so many reasons, and like you said, him being Mexican, like the Hispanic part, I related to that. Him being smaller, I related to that. Like there were a lot of relatable things to Rey Mysterio, and then you throw in he had great charisma and he was fun
Oh
to
yeah.
watch. There's just so many different things to love about Rey Mysterio that he's honestly probably a lot of people, especially our ages, like one of our favorite wrestlers that we watched growing up.
Oh yeah, has to be. Like you said, just from our era, from whoever grew up with us watching wrestling, I feel like I understand people have love-hate relationships with certain wrestlers, but I feel like a majority of fans can agree that, Rey Mysterio is very likable.
Yeah, there's a video I think of a dog. He was like playing with a toy, and then he looked up at the TV and he saw something, and he like dropped the toy and then walked up to the TV and sat down and started watching. I mean, that's how I am, and I've always been with Rey Mysterio. If I see Rey Mysterio on the screen, I'll drop what I'm doing,
You
sit down,
just
and I'll watch the match.
Yeah, yeah, I can completely relate to that.
And then with the Undertaker, I mean, I don't feel like I fully appreciated the Undertaker until I was older and like saw not just his presence and everything, but his career as a whole. Now that it's over too, for what it is, how incredibly important he was for the business, the longevity of his career, his abilities in ring, out ring, just his presence. He people call him the Godfather because that's really
Yeah,
like what he is to wrestling. And I mean, I don't. It's for a lot of people, it's not arguable that he's the goat. He's the greatest of all time when it comes to, especially that business, WWE. He's the goat.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, if they're super fans like you and I, they've seen behind the scenes, videos and clips, and it's a lot that Undertaker does that we don't see, that also just it goes unnoticed, but it's what makes him great. I can remember watching it was an interview, I think it was Cody Rhodes, it might have been somebody else, but this was when he first started in the WWE, and they were in the Royal Rumble.
I know
And
exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, okay, yeah. See, so they were in the Royal Rumble, and Cody was, he had his little, I want to say like 10 seconds of fame, and
Hmm.
he took a chance, and decided to swing at Undertaker, and Undertaker was kind of down, and Cody says he whispered like drop kick me. And he, the fact that he's willing to kind of just let himself do that for, a smaller superstar like that, I just think it's what makes the Undertaker great, and it's what makes him completely respectable as a professional, as a wrestler. And for us, he always will be one of the better superstars that we saw in our era.
I feel like Undertaker just reached a point in his career. where I mean everyone is kind of fighting, everyone's fighting for their spot. Everyone's scared of losing that spot. So putting someone over, especially in an inexperienced or, greener person over, when yourself, you are like a veteran like the Undertaker or whoever else, like doing that, one, you don't need to do it. You don't need to put this young kid over if you didn't want to. Uh, and two, like if this kid becomes the next Cena, the next The Rock, he might take your spot. He might take
Yeah,
whatever time you have on screen. So that's why it's hard, or that's why you don't really see that as often. You'll see a lot of, or hear a lot of talk of the veterans, burying younger talent, getting the golden shovel, and burying them and not wanting them to succeed. But I feel like I've never heard that about the Undertaker. Like
yeah,
Undertaker at a point reached that stardom, reached, I'm one of the top guys in this business. And since that point, he has always put guys over and let them get in their offense, let them get in their moves. Sometimes he wins, sometimes he lose, but it's so impressive to have watched him be able to keep that balance of being a top guy, being a guy that comes out on top, yet he still makes whoever he's wrestling look great in the process. That's a skill,
it
and
is.
he's someone who mastered it better than most people could ever learn to do that,
It's
ever.
it it's an art, the way he's
Yeah,
perfected it, man.
yeah,
It truly is amazing to see.
yeah. I mean, he knows it's an art to be able to make a wrestler like Cody Rhodes, a young Cody Rhodes, or like a young Randy Orton, guys that have the skill but don't really have the name yet, and be able to sell to the crowd that they can go toe to toe with the Undertaker. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I love the Undertaker. I love watching documentaries. I love that now that his career ended, and even a little bit before that, he was able to actually go on shows like the Joe Rogan podcast, like Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast, do behind the scenes stuff, do his documentary, and really get like finally the curtain unveiled on one of the greatest wrestlers in history and one of the greatest athletes in history. Because I mean, the guy was a legit 6'8" to 6'10", walking the top rope, doing old school. He was incredibly agile and
Yeah, of
for his size, like
course.
incredible. Like he doesn't get enough credit. Like Kane's pretty agile for his size, around the same size as the Undertaker, but Undertaker was incredibly nimble for how big he was. And all the striking that he was able to do, he really had a combat background as well. So like he was just so much of the like legit all around package.
Yeah, really was, and they've a lot of WWE, I heard, Michael Cole and JR, and I've heard a lot of, commentators say it. I've heard other wrestlers say it, that Undertaker's the best pure striker, in wrestling. And you can see it, just from his form. And I mean, like you said, with how athletic he is, this dude, would go on top of the turnbuckle holding a wrestler's arm, walk the top rope, and then go down and strike him, and it's not everyone his size that can just do that, it's not everyone, that tall, that big, really, you don't really see that, and that's just another characteristic from the Undertaker that just makes him stand out from everybody else.
My favorite wrestler of all time. I mean, it's there's so many. That's what makes it so hard. There's just so many great wrestlers that you can go with.
It's a tough choice.
Um, I feel like I feel like I want to say Undertaker, but I'm not going to, just because I love the Undertaker, one of if not the greatest of all time. But when it comes to impact on me, like throughout my life, not just like in the last couple years, it would probably be The Rock is up there, Cena is up there, Edge is up there, and Eddie Guerrero. It somewhere in those 4, I'd have to decide.
All great choices. Every single one of those names that you threw out can be considered, in their own way, the- you know, extremely great, and if not the greatest,
Edge's entrance music is the best entrance music of
hands
all
down,
time.
hands down.
It's not a debate for anyone to debate someone else's song. The best song. When he came back in that Royal Rumble, I don't know if you've seen that footage,
Oh
but when
my,
that hit, I
unbelievable!
screamed. I
I
screamed.
goosebumps,
I
goosebumps,
I have talked to grown men who were like, "Yeah, I cried." Like people in the crowd was everyone around the world
shocked.
was shook. Unbelievable.
You
And
just
it
heard you heard the entrance that "You Think You Know Me," and then
and
it just hit.
everyone jumped up. It was like, "What?"
Unbelievable.
Oh, it was the best. It was the best.
I'm guilty of still watching that clip to
Me
this day.
too. Me too. Trust me, we're not the only ones. I know we're not the only ones to go back and watch it. I mean, just his career and him having to call it quits because of an injury, and everything that he had done before, his growth as a wrestler, coming in with Edge or coming in with Christian, being able to make a name for himself as a singles competitor, and then just really being respected not just by the fans but by everyone in the locker room, everyone around him, and like known as like a top, like this is one of the guys of this generation. This guy is on there as like one of
Yeah,
the top guys.
yeah. It's I mean, you think of how many iconic moments he's been a part of. You think of the matches that he's been, and I mean, it going back to what you said, him having to get, I think it was what, triple neck surgery or something like that. I mean, that's injuries that other athletes would probably never come back from. Like that's, once you hit that point, getting neck surgery that serious, like that's, you call it quits for your career. And for him to come back the way he did in the Royal Rumble, just unexpectedly shocked. I mean, if you go back to that clip, you can see it on his face, how excited he is, how much he just loves the industry. He loves the crowd, the environment. You can just see the passion just on his face, and he's
Hmm.
always had that about him, I mean, the rated R superstar, this is, everyone knows him for that, it's something that's always going to be a part of him, and it's something that, I mean, granted, I wasn't a very big Edge fan growing up. I was more towards, like I said, Undertaker and Rey Mysterio and Batista, but I always saw Edge as a very, very good competitor. And just with how he was as a wrestler, it sometimes I I I had to give my respect to him, and now that I'm older, now that I look back at his career and everything that he's gone through, I have so much respect for him. And even going right down to the intro music that you and I just spoke of. I mean, that's got to be top 3, at least maybe top 2 all-time songs. So,
If I ever get the chance to speak to Ed, the first thing I'm gonna ask him is that entrance music. The first time you heard it, were you like, "Yeah, that's the one"? Like, I
this
want
is
to know because
it.
it had to be like it was just like he heard it and he was like, "Yeah, no, this is
This
this
is
is the
it.
greatest of all time."
This is it. That'd be a good question. If you find out, let me know.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, Edge, Guerrero. I mean, everyone loved Guerrero.
Yeah,
Literally everyone. He was
Latino
amazing and
Heat.
amazing in the ring. Coming out in the low rider, tag champions with uh, Mysterio and Chavo, and then
Bravo.
becoming
Yeah,
world champion. Someone that I didn't mention that it's hard to say he wouldn't like take the cake for me for my favorite, Kurt Angle.
Kurt
Kurt
Angle's
Angle.
great. That's a
If
great name too.
if anyone in wrestling had what we consider in basketball as Mamba mentality, it's Kurt freaking Angle.
It is 100%. I mean, you think about who he is. This is an Olympic gold medalist. I mean, you looked at this guy's physique and you just knew, okay, this guy means business.
An
It's
Olympic gold medalist who won with a broken freaking neck.
what more do you want? This was the perfect man for this industry.
If that's not Mamba mentality, I don't know what Mamba mentality is, going in with a broken neck and winning the gold medal.
Gold medal. Yeah, I I don't know what to call it if it's not mama mentality.
and just his you could hear it in interviews, not just now, but even back then, listening to him, the just like unstoppable hunger he had for being the best. Like it's all he thought about was being the guy, being the best. It's Mamba mentality.
Yeah, it's I mean, I remember the rivalry that, he always had, when he was back on Raw. I remember when he became the face of ECW, and I mean, it was a time when I feel like wrestling was absolutely entertaining to watch. It was must watch TV, as a kid. I never wanted to miss it. So,
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of my favorite guys, especially now, are guys that, especially when watching stuff about them backstage, they know the psychology of the sport and how to succeed in it and how to be the best. It's like I was shown from someone a video of Iman Shumpert talking about LeBron and how like crazy smart. That's not a news flash. How crazy smart and how crazy good LeBron's IQ is, like one of the best ever. And there are a lot of guys that you can correlate that to the IQ that wrestlers have. Some wrestlers, guys like the Undertaker, guys like Angle, that they just have, the IQ from doing it for so long, doing it so often, and just being the best at it. That it's like they know what is going to happen and they know what needs to happen to put on a great match. And all the wrestlers that like they can go into a match and just blow the roof off the place because they were in there with someone that they knew what was going to happen, and they could feel off of each other and off of their experiences, and like with minimal to no prep, just go out there and be amazing.
yeah, go out and just do what they normally do, and it's almost like muscle memory for these guys to just go out and do all these amazing things.
Yeah.
Something that, just as professionals with as good as they are, that's just something that they built over time, and they can always go out and just put on a show whenever. And that just goes to show, just how great Kurt Angle was, The Undertaker was, and just, any wrestlers that kind of fall under that umbrella.
Do you have a favorite match
Favorite match? That's
or,
actually a good question. I don't
or
think
a
anybody.
memorable match, a match you can very like clearly in your head look back on in its entirety, or certain important moments in that match?
I think I think there's two that stand out to me, and both actually occurred at WrestleMania. I think the first one for me was the Money in the Bank ladder match from WrestleMania 23. And that was when Randy Orton, Edge, Matt, and Jeff Hardy. There was other guys in there, but I remember it was an 8-man Money in the Bank ladder match, and I'll always remember the match when Matt kind of put Edge on the ladder that was
Oh
just on the barricade,
no.
and for some reason, I
Oh
was screaming at the TV for Jeff to win, just grab the briefcase, just get the title match. And he wanted to steal the show, and he did a leg
no.
drop off the top of the ladder and just put Edge through that ladder. I think that's a memory I have in my head as clear as day.
I've rewatched that so many times, Jeremy. I mean, it just looks so painful.
It really does. He
Like,
broke the ladder in half.
oh, it looks so painful, man. Watching Jeff, his full weight comes down on Edge, and he was high. He was up like maybe second to highest rung on the super big ladder, not like
Yeah,
the
it
normal
wasn't. It wasn't
size.
a normal ladder.
It
Yeah,
was the super big one. And then just lands completely centered on Edge's like torso and stomach. Just bam, perfect, breaks the ladder. And afterwards, I mean, if a wrestler is like rolling around and screaming, usually that's how you know it's fake. Usually that's how you know it's a part of the show. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes they're rolling around and screaming. They're really in pain.
it is. Yeah,
But usually it's like, all right, they're trying to sell it. Edge was not moving. Edge
at
was
all.
barely making a
At all.
sound. you could kind of hear a little bit like him literally like groaning in pain. Like he was on his back like this, hand on his
Yeah,
back, and he would not. If a wrestler isn't moving after something like that, that hurt a
it's bad.
lot.
It's bad. Yeah. Yeah,
That's
just that's just a vivid it's such a clear memory in my head, and
it's so great though. So great. That's something that will live on for so long, just in video packages and highlights. Like it will be talked about for years to come.
oh, yeah. If Jeff Hardy wanted to steal the show and be remembered, that he absolutely succeeded because I'm sure I'm not the only fan who can remember that. I mean, you can probably look up and see how many hundreds of thousands of views that video has, it was crazy, So that's match number 1. The other one that I can really think of that I thought was just absolutely amazing was when Shawn Michaels, faced The Undertaker at WrestleMania.
Oh
I think
yeah,
overall, I think, with just the level of intensity between the 2 of them, with how great both superstars are, just the stage, I mean, it was just something to remember, forever.
definitely. Just one of the one of the best matches of all time, for sure. Between when people talk about the greatest wrestler of all time, those two names are usually the first ones brought up. Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, and Ric Flair are probably the
Yeah.
first people that are brought up as the greatest wrestlers of all time. So I mean, just such a great match, and just two blockbuster names. Like for the first wrestle feature, doing Angle and Michaels, and then like those are two other blockbuster names. It just falls into that like list of matches that it's just like both those names are just phenomenal wrestlers. Angle Michaels, Undertaker Michaels, Brock Lesnar Angle, Guerrero, like just so like those names. It just a beautiful match, a master class of wrestling. If you want to know how to do it the
Truly.
right way, you watch that match.
Yeah, 100%. That's one again, like, if people I feel like if someone were to, tell me like, "Hey, I've never seen wrestling before. Can you show me one match you think would get me hooked?" I would show them that one.
I would I would show them that one. I would show them that one, and then I would show them what I would consider my favorite match. Um, and it's I mean, there's so many phenomenal matches, but
There is. Yeah.
if I were to pick one, it would probably be from what I consider to be the greatest WrestleMania of all time, WrestleMania 17, the TLC match between Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, and the Dudley Boys.
Oh, that is a great choice. I have the ladder match DVD. That was probably one of the first DVDs, like wrestling DVDs I ever bought, and I can remember being so hooked onto the TV when that match came out. I I didn't wanna like, if I remember correctly, like, my parents were trying to go somewhere. We were supposed to go to, like, my uncle's house, and I told them, I was like, "No, we need to wait. I need to finish this. Like, I don't wanna leave and wonder what's gonna happen." So,
Yep. Yep. I mean, oh man. And you talk about the match where Jeff Hardy puts Edge through that ladder in WrestleMania 17, another one of the most famous spots of all time, the Edge's spear off the ladder to Jeff Hardy who's hanging on
yeah.
the ring. I mean, that match, there's so many amazing spots through the entirety of that match. If you really pay attention and like watch closely, like the three of them really are working in sync, in unison, setting up for what's the spots that are coming next, what's happening next. Like it's just it's beautiful. It's a beautiful match to watch. It's like not a short match either. And there was a lot of stuff going on throughout that match. You know, in order for Jeff to be hanging perfectly for Edge to come and get that spear, Devon Dudley had to be in the right place at the right time, or it might have been Bubba, but he had to move the ladder away from Jeff Hardy. There's constant, setting up tables, setting up ladders. It's
Yeah.
uh just it's like a play. It's like you have to know what's coming next. You have to be in your spots and help set up for the next amazing thing that's gonna happen that's gonna wow the crowd.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's amazing too because I mean, you know, those all three of those tag teams, they were such an important part in the industry, in I mean, the history of the industry, the history of just tag team matches in general, and they helped innovate the ladder match into what it is today. They helped, innovate TLC and everything, everything about like Extreme Rules, a lot of it revolved around those three teams. And I mean,
That
it's
was the match, man. That was the
yeah,
match that put it on the map. And at the same time, that around that WrestleMania time, around that WrestleMania 17, the mid card was stacked unlike it's ever been stacked in the history of wrestling. Like that mid tier wrestlers of the tag teams, and you know people like Guerrero. Like there's so many like guys that aren't like the like here like Rock and Austin are they're not bad wrestlers. Like that mid card.
top notch.
I mean, just goes to show that how incredible that era of wrestling really was.
Yeah, truly something to remember, and us as fans, we will always look back at that time and we can appreciate everything down to the every little detail for that.
Yep. And when it comes to guys that we talk about like the Undertaker, like Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, the Guerreros, for me, I like to a big reason why I like to watch documentaries and behind the scenes and stuff is a lot of what I go into like judging a wrestler and who he is behind the scenes and how good he is of a wrestler and all that stuff, is how do your peers see you? The people that are with you every day on the road, the people that are with you in the rings, in matches constantly, the people that you're fighting against, the people that you're fighting with, like how do they see you? And like guys like the Undertaker, nothing but praise, admiration, and gratitude from the people that talk about him. And if you want to put Edge and Christian or Dudley Boys and like, oh, are they the greatest tag team of all time? It's like listen to the guys that they fought against. Go ask the guys that they fought against and ask them what they think about those guys. They'll
Yeah,
tell you. They'll
they'll give
tell you
you.
that they are the
Mhm.
greatest of all time. They'll tell you that. And you can tell when someone is genuine about that praise and when someone's just saying it to keep face or anything like that. Like you can tell, especially with guys like that, you can tell when they're being genuine about those guys are the real deal and should be respected as some of the greatest to ever lace up their boots.
Yeah, agreed. And it says a lot because I mean, guys like people they faced, you know, I feel like they would have more to say more than anybody. Them being the opposition to them in the ring, they have way more experience with who they are, with what they're like competitively, with what they're like outside the locker room. They would know them better than anybody else. And if they're saying as genuine as it is, that they have all this respect and praise for them, that's probably something that people should at least consider because they would know again better than you and I, as us as fans, we're just watching on TV, they spend every day, they spend all this time on the road with them and that's just time that we don't get to see, but they have that chance.
Exactly. I mean, there's a video on YouTube of Devon and Jeff Hardy watching one of their past ladder matches. There's a video that I saw on social media of Taker, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels talking about a wrestling match that they had at WrestleMania. It's like watching them and watching them talk about each other and kind of geek out about each other at the same time. Like it's I that's always one of my favorite things to watch as a fan. Like watching them talk about not just this piece of art that they put in the wrestling ring, but talk about the people that they did it with.
Yeah, I mean, for them to kind of just have that kind of moment, you would think, with, for example, like you said, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, and Triple H, those are three of the biggest names in the industry. And me as a fan, I would never think, like they would geek out about each other like that. They spend all this time in the ring, with their level, like with their status and who they are. I would never think, that they would have moments like that. And to kind of see that, it kind of reminds me, like, you know what? They're also human too. Like they have
Mm-hmm.
those types of feelings. And if they want to have moments like that where they want to just praise and kind of have a little geek out, then they should be allowed to. And I think I always enjoyed seeing moments like that.
Yeah, not just humans, but fans. Above all else, they're fans of what they do. They're fans of wrestling. So yeah, I love watching professionals of any industry geek over their profession, what they've done for their profession, or the people that they've done it with. It's like wow, they really are a fan of this. They're not just kind of doing it.
Yeah, they're not just here to kind of just
Make
sort of
money.
pick up a paycheck. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
They have a passion for it, just like some of us do.
exactly. Um, do you have a favorite championship belt?
Mm, I was always a big fan of the World Heavyweight Championship.
The
Just the
WCW one.
Yeah, just the way it looked, just how it was. I mean, the superstars to wear it. I mean, that was the first belt I was introduced to, and I think that the nostalgia might be the reason why I kind of favored it. But it was something that I always just loved, and I always wanted to buy one. And when I saw the price for like a legit one, I was like, you know what? Maybe I don't need that, but it's still something I enjoy.
I used to love the cruiserweight belt from back in the day.
Okay,
That one was
that
cool.
was a cool belt.
The white Intercontinental Championship that they had in recent years.
That one I think is very unique because
It's a
I
beautiful
remember
belt.
I remember the Intercontinental title, and you know, it didn't really stand out. I mean, it
It
was
was
cool.
okay. It was
Yeah,
okay. It was
but
alright.
for them to change it to white, that made me kind of see it like, whoa,
Yeah, it made it
that
stand
looks
out.
cool. Yeah, agreed.
I enjoyed the old tag team championship belts, the WWE tag team champion belts. The old, probably my favorite of all time, and the world heavyweight championship belt that's up there. But my favorite of all time is the actual world WWE championship belt, the one that Guerrero had, the early 2000s one before they switched it to Cena's, fidget spinner.
The spinny one, yeah,
Yeah, before the one before that was my favorite belt of all time. Just very I don't know. It was very official. It was very like a real belt. It wasn't a toy. It wasn't just a logo for the company. Like it was something. Like it was a belt. It
it
felt like
was
it meant
legit.
something.
Yeah, it definitely had meaning to it.
I don't know if you've seen it, but on NXT they have what for me is my favorite belt at the moment. It's called the North American Championship belt.
I have not seen that yet, actually.
I will show it to you after all this, but it is a beautiful belt and the best looking belt currently today. I don't think that's a question.
Gonna have to check that out then.
Yeah, it's a great belt. It reminds me of those of the belts of like the world or the WWE belt that I was talking about. That's my favorite of all time. It reminds me of
Gotcha.
that kind of style. So were you a Raw guy or were you a SmackDown guy?
I was more of a SmackDown guy. And I think, again, this all goes back to the story I was telling you. Friday Night SmackDown was the first wrestling show I was ever introduced to. Um, I just love the intro. I loved, uh, I mean, it was blue. Blue was my favorite color, and I mean, the superstars that were on there, I just loved. And it was just, I would definitely consider myself more of a SmackDown guy.
Me too. Me too. I mean, I would watch SmackDown every week with my dad. All from back in the day when it was on UPN before it got moved to any like before it was anything crazier. But it was like watching Guerrero, watching Lesnar, watching Angle, Chavo, uh, Rey Mysterio, just so many great wrestlers, and that's what it was. I feel like, and they've said it many times before. Raw was very much the entertainment aspect, and SmackDown was very much just the wrestling. They put on wrestling matches, and I mean, it was amazing. Like there was periods of time where every week it was like Lesnar, Big Show, and Undertaker in their primes were having just all like a phenomenal feuds. Like it was just amazing to watch. And I mean, as time went on, I appreciated Raw a lot more than I did at that point.
So did
But
I.
I always saw myself as a SmackDown person, and I always loved Michael Cole. Michael Cole when I was a kid was my favorite. I mean, I feel like as time's gone on, I've appreciated JR and like I recognize JR as the GOAT commentator because he really, really is that. But as a kid, I listened to Michael Cole before I ever even cared about who JR was.
Me too. And that's another big reason. I think it's crazy you brought that up because I had that same connection, and again, I understood how big Raw was, and I knew, just what it meant to the industry. But for me, I for some reason I was always gravitated towards Michael Cole's voice. Something about the way he called matches, just his voice, just everything about just him as a commentator, I was just drawn to immediately, and
And him and
just like
Taz.
yeah,
Him and
it was
Taz.
great. It was such
Yes.
great. It was I could not think of 2 better commentators for SmackDown.
It was their chemistry, like if in the weirdest of ways, it fed off each other's. They fed off each other so well, and it was very entertaining in a way that doesn't get a whole lot of credit. Like JR and Jerry Lawler, they get a lot of credit as commentators and being commentating team. Paul Heyman gets it. I mean, it's well deserved. Not saying that they don't deserve that credit. Of course they do. They're some of the best to ever do it. And guys like Joey Styles, but Michael Cole and Taz definitely deserve, you know, praise for all the great work that they did, especially in that time.
Yeah, they don't get enough recognition. I feel like they're underappreciated 100%.
I mean, that leads into what I was going to ask next. Who's your favorite commentator? Is it Michael Cole?
Has to be Michael Cole. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just again, it's whenever he would call Friday Night SmackDown, it doesn't matter what event it was. It could have been, it could have been the opening event, it could have been the opening match, the main event of the night, or anything in between, and I was always just wanting to hear, okay, what does this guy have to say? What's he gonna call? Is he gonna throw some little fact, or is he going to do it was always, I just didn't know what to expect. And just the way his voice was, it was just really easy to hear on the ears.
As time went on, Michael Cole kind of started getting stale to me. Like it was they started doing more things where, Michael Cole started even like wrestling and ring, and he was just much more involved than just being the commentator. And I was never really a huge fan of those moments. Um, and I just feel like as time went on, the things that he said became, or at least felt, more and more scripted. Like he felt like I don't know, it started not feeling genuine at times, and like he was like the ad guy at one point in wrestling. Like every ad that came out, like he was the one that had to like say sponsored by this, like go do that. And it's like,
Yeah,
and that's why as I got older and I looked back and even watched documentaries and all this stuff, like I started appreciating JR so much more. And like he really is like the go at doing what he does. And and to find out, I'm sure he prepares, but most of what he does is off the top of his head. And that's a legit talent to be able to do that as well as he does it, be one of the best ever, if not the best ever, and have it mostly come off just the top of your brain.
just spitballing. I mean, it's truly amazing, and you think about the iconic moments that JR has called. There's so many calls that I can think of, just JR calling it, and I mean, you can think of anything from, when Undertaker threw Mankind off the Hell in a Cell. And
He's broken in half,
yeah,
or Tyson and Austin, Tyson and Austin. There's
you
so
think of
many.
it's so many moments, and that is, as I got older, I understood, like, oh wow, like we're never gonna hear something like this again. Like it's just the timing of it, just what he says in the moment. If it, like you said, if it's just off the top of his head, that's not something everyone can do. I mean, you and I can try that, whether it comes out as
It
good as
won't be
JR
as
or not.
great. It will
Yeah,
not be as great.
no way, and that's just with who he was and just how good he was. That's something that I grew to love as a fan.
Yeah, I mean, and there have been other commentators that they've been good, they've been solid. Booker T, I like Booker T in commentary. I like JBL in commentary. Corey Graves. They have some and have had some good commentators, but it's like that to me they're mid card, and Jr. Guys like Michael Cole, they're main event.
Yeah, they're in that elite tier of
Yep.
commentators.
definitely. Um, are you are you someone who enjoyed, I mean, we both grew up watching in that ruthless aggression era in like the early to mid 2000s, even, the late 2000s. Um, Personally, do you enjoy the ruthless aggression era more than the attitude era of the early 90s, or and no, and subjectively or objectively, putting yourself aside, which one do you think is better, ruthless aggression or attitude?
So I think, I mean, if I had to pick between the two, speaking objectively, of course, if I had to put myself aside and, kind of just look at this from a very unbiased angle, I really think that the Attitude Era is what elevated WWE into just. I mean, again, you think of wrestling at that time, it was popular. It had good names that were coming out, and it was must watch TV to some extent. But during that Attitude Era, that just elevated it like into the stratosphere. I mean, that was when it just exponentially grew. And I always, hear stories of like my older cousins or like people that I know that grew up watching that Attitude Era, and they just describe literally every great moment. And the fact that they were able to see stuff like that live, like I can go back and watch it, but I know it's not the same. I know, I've heard kind of, well, this is what happened, and I get to watch it play out, but they had to watch it in real time. They got to see guys like Austin, like The Rock. They got to see so many guys like that, like in real time. And I think, like, wow, what a time it must have been to be a wrestling fan in that era. And that's not to say that the ruthless aggression era was terrible or anything like that. I believe that the ruthless aggression era was fantastic in its own way, but I think overall, like, for what it did for the industry and for what it did for the growth of the company, I think the Attitude Era is hands down the better era.
And personally, someone that grew up in the ruthless aggression era, would you like, is it your personal favorite, or can you even just, or would you say attitude era is still your favorite, like for you?
I mean, if I'm speaking personally, I would probably link the ruthless aggression era more just for myself, and that's just because of my nostalgic ties to like Jeff Hardy, to Rey Mysterio, to The Undertaker. I mean, because I'm so gravitated to those superstars, that's probably why I would lean towards the ruthless aggression era. But I understand how great the Attitude Era was, and I will never bash it. I'll never put it down because I understand, what a time it was during that era.
I mean, I'm the same way. I grew up on watching Eddie Guerrero come out in the low rider. I grew up on watching Batista come out and do the machine guns with fireworks going off in the
Fireworks.
background. Like I grew up in that time, so it just holds such an important place in my heart. But I can recognize the Attitude Era as being probably the most important era in the history of wrestling. But yeah, for me personally, I mean, nothing could touch the ruthless aggression era. And I mean, it can stand on its own, legs. It's not like like you said, it's not a bad era. You had Evolution, you had the beginning of John Cena, the Doctor of Thugonomics. You had Edge, you had Taker, you had Lesnar, you had just, the list goes on and on and on of just the talent that you had to work with. And attitude and ruthless aggression. Like you could go on YouTube, type in WWE, and there's just phenomenal matches that weren't even pay per view. It was just like a regular Friday night SmackDown in the middle of, the middle of the
Mm.
year at just a random time. And it's
Yeah.
like Angle, Big Show, Lesnar, Undertaker, Eddie Guerrero. It's just like Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer, and a 6-man tag. And it's like, of course I'll watch this.
Yeah. Why not? And
Yeah.
us talking about all these wrestling videos and all this wrestling talk, you're gonna make me want to go down a rabbit hole on YouTube again. So all this
Oh
nostalgia
man.
is coming back.
Yep. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug. Last thing I want to talk to you about is a comparison that I've made to Luis many times, and I mean it's a good comparison at times. Sometimes it doesn't really make sense, but it's just always how I've seen it. I've always seen what The Rock and John Cena were, and not really for each other, but just like how they were in the business. I always compared them to Jordan and Kobe Bryant in basketball in the sense of the similarities between the two of them and how important they were in the times that they were wrestling that or performing their sport. I don't know if you can see that comparison.
I can actually. Now that you kind of put it in words like that, I can definitely see the resemblance, and I can see why the comparison is made.
Because I don't even have to compare Jordan and Kobe. We know that they were Kobe was like a carbon copy of Michael Jordan on the basketball court.
100%.
And I feel like The Rock and John Cena don't get that comparison enough. But I mean, it's a very simple list. Amazing on the mics, probably the best of their each individual eras on the mic. Um, they both, they started out, with a decent persona, a decent character. Then they switched over to who they really were and just took off into
Yeah.
superstardom.
Yep.
Um, two guys who just always went headfirst into the business and headfirst into whatever that they do. I mean, John Cena is going into show business now the way The Rock did in the early 2000s. Like,
Yeah.
there's just so many comparisons. And, and even just in ring, two guys who, they were very, very fun to watch in ring, but never like the most amazing technical wrestlers. Like they could go when they needed to, but they were always known for doing a couple moves and winning the match at the end of the night. Two guys also who, kind of lame finishers. I've never been afraid to say that the people's elbow is just The Rock doing a couple laps and dropping an elbow. The rock bottom is him just slinging an arm over the shoulder and just basically laying them down on their back. The attitude adjustment for Cena is just a fireman's carry. Like the best thing that The Rock would do was the sharpshooter and the Samoa drop for me. The Samoa drop, those two moves were like the coolest moves that The Rock had, and his spine buster was great too. And then Cena, his five knuckle shuffle was just him pumping up his kicks, and then just a punch to the face on the ground.
Yeah.
Like and Cena, I think there was a point in Cena's career where he kind of heard that and he started adding other moves to his career later in his career. Like he started doing a stunner. He started doing different variations of bulldogs. Like he started adding a top rope leg drop. He started adding different moves to it because I think he was hearing your people started calling him five move Cena. Like he just do five moves in a match and that'd be the end of it. I think that got to him. And I mean, I don't think anyone could say they're bad wrestlers because they're not. I mean, they're guys that have put in the work. They're guys that know how to wrestle.
Agreed.
Um, and I mean, if anything, it's more power to them that they have this amazing stardom off of moves that, when taking a step back, like they're not amazing moves, but they are able to make it work and be two of the top guys to ever be in that business. But that just all that stuff just solidified that kind of comparison for me, comparing them in the way that I compared Jordan and Kobe.
It's completely understandable. Again, now that you've put it into words and have explained it as well as you did, I think better than anyone else could. It's almost, I don't want to say shocking, but it's eye-opening to for a fan to kind of see all this. And
Yeah.
you even said it right down to them going into show business. Like that's not even something I even considered when you had compared the two. And they're great in their own way, just like Kobe and Jordan were. They were great in their own way, in their own era. Same with The Rock and Cena, and they'll always be remembered. The Rock in the Attitude Era and then Cena for the Ruthless Aggression era. But to make that comparison, it's 100% understandable. Something
Yeah,
I actually never saw, and that's something I actually never considered, and you kinda opened my eyes on that, and I'm honestly grateful you did because it is pretty shocking, but at the same time, I find it very amazing.
and even like The Rock went out to show business, did the Scorpion King, did Walking Tall. Now he's one of the biggest actors in Hollywood. And Cena is coming out in the Suicide Squad. Cena is coming out in Fast Nine. Like they're just both very similarly becoming these blockbuster movie stars.
Crazy. To see where they started, in their careers in WWE, to see how big they got in that industry, and then for them to shift over to film, cinema, and, movies and all that, and to see how great they're doing there, I mean, it just goes to show, I mean, they've come such a long way from when you and I first were introduced to them. So
And we got to see an older Jordan a few times play against a young Kobe Bryant, and we got to see uh The Rock face John Cena at WrestleMania twice. And their feud, like them going back and forth on Raw and wherever they were like promoting their match. I don't know if you've seen the videos of some of the stuff that they did during that time, but it was amazing. It was incredibly entertaining. I don't Have you seen that stuff?
I've seen bits and pieces. I've never seen like full videos.
Yeah, like they had like a concert. Like Cena came out as he re-came out as the doctor of thugonomics, and he rapped about The Rock, which was hilarious. The Rock came out and did a rock concert. Like he sung songs about Cena. You know, The Rock did a bunch of videos of him making fun of Cena. Cena did a bunch of rebuttals. And we know that those two guys can be extremely entertaining, especially when it comes to making fun of other people and setting up a match. It was two of the best going at
Easily.
each other, so it was
Yeah.
incredibly entertaining.
Yeah, that's something I haven't seen, but I've heard so many things about it. I mean, you've mentioned it a couple times. I've heard of some of my other friends, who've watched it. They've mentioned it before, so that's something I need to see.
Yeah, it was great stuff.